command of two generals, General Lafayette and General Anthony Wayne. That force already attacked the British forces that arrived here at the Battle of Green Springs. That was July the 6th. The British Army arrives here. That opponent is in the region, the area. They need to create a wall that we see represented over there. Parts and pieces of this wall are original. Parts and pieces have been added on, redefined over time. At the highest point, it was about 25 feet high. The sharpest point emanating to the intersection of the roads was called the hornwork, because to the British officers that saw it on the map, they said it looked like an animal horn. They will have a work crew of roughly 2,000 men, forced labor, slaves, brought in from various parts of Virginia. They're handed picks, shovels, hand tools. It takes 1 month to dig out a trench on the opposite side, create this wall. Trees will be cut, drive in logs that are very sharp, stakes emanating out of the wall. They will have ramps for the artillery. They will demolish any building on the outside of the wall, and these are the reasons. They need line of fire for the artillery. Number two, they do not want their opponent to have protective cover. And they need to displace weight of a very heavy piece of metal that is a barrel on a carriage. They need to displace weight of a very heavy artillery piece. So what they're going to do is to create a bed, a platform of planks of wood from dismantled buildings. This is in that fascinating book called The Guns of Independence by Jerome Green. You wouldn't believe the information, the quotations, the maps, the types of information. It is unbelievable what's in that book, that source of information. A lot of people would think, well, if it's over 200 years, we really don't know. You would be shocked what is known in there. The commander of the British forces is Charles Lord Cornwallis, roughly 8,300 men. 2,000 speak German, they're Hessian soldiers. One of these, once again, Stephen Pott would write about the construction of this wall. The most important thing I can tell you is that when the British forces arrive here, they only bring small cannons. And if you think about this, if you are an officer and your goal is to go over Virginia with the poor, inadequate roads in 1781, what kind of cannon can you bring to Virginia? Field artillery, large wheel, small barrel, it would have mobility, lightweight, less horses, less men. You don't have to devote that much time to feeding or resources to using that type of weapon. By and large, the British forces bring small, lightweight artillery, 244 artillery pieces. Cornwallis arrives here on this hilltop because he wants to take advantage of the depth of the water, warehouses, supply rooms already at the village, docking facility. Most civilians flee, go out of the area when they arrive. Open land of 800 yards, and he gets a report that because of the breezes and the wind, you're not having those mysterious illnesses or fevers that break out if you are literally in a marshy or swampy area. There would be marshes far in the distance, there would be a swamp on the other side of the village, but the British forces will not be there, so they will not be prone to malaria, mosquito-borne illnesses. These are the reasons they come here. Their hope, their intent is to split the colonies in half if they are supplied by a naval force from New York with more provisions, supplies, more black powder, more fresh troops. They intend to go over the entire colony of Virginia, militarily control it, split the colonies in half, and fourthly, sever any supply lines for the British forces, over the American forces that would come into the area. This is the tail end of the American Revolution. Everything here is because of wind. Cornwallis is coming here because it tends to be windy, this kind of thing, nice on top of the hilltop. And because if a world power has joined the American Revolution, they have signed a document, it's the Oath of Alliance. They're in competition with Great Britain over control of the Mississippi River. They're in competition over control of the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean. Fourthly, their colonies compete in the Caribbean. France has joined a document called the Oath of Alliance. And the sixth reason is they have lost thousands of acres in their colony in an earlier war with England called the French and Indian War, 1755 to 1762. Their fleet cannot be in the Caribbean during hurricane season. Their fleet will arrive off of Virginia Beach at the Atlantic Ocean, far over in that direction. Their fleet will arrive and form what will be a naval blockade. They're waiting. They're waiting for the naval force to come in, the Royal Navy from New York. That battle takes place September the 5th. The Royal Navy will turn and leave. This means that the French fleet will control the waterways. They will bring in a massive heavy weapon that is represented over there. Is there a difference between what the Allies would have this and the small one that typically the British forces would have. There is a big difference. That one could fire effectively over 1.25 miles. It has tremendous destructive capability. It can sink ships, and that will happen on October the 10th. It will penetrate earthen walls, and it will demolish about 80% of the village that's occupied by the British forces. The problem with that small artillery piece over there that the British forces have, effective range is about 1 mile, and it cannot penetrate over 20 feet of earthen walls. All armies here will create earthen walls. All armies here will be using artillery, but the aim, the direction of the Allies is to fire and hit the British artillery on the side, dismantle it, and put it on the ground. The only type of weapons that would be used here that could fire exploding shells would be the two on the right, howitzer on the far right. The one beside it with no wheels is called a mortar, and that is to put an exploding shell up in the air in an arc behind obstacles, behind your opponent's earthworks. It's largely anti-personnel. You want to put out a killing zone of roughly 50 feet. You want it to burst in the air. It's very different how it would be used. Thirdly, that one over there with no barrel on it, the one over there, the third one from the right, that is a limber. That's what would be used to tow a small wheeled artillery piece. Washington will arrive here with his troops, over 16,000 men, last week of September. They completely surround the British forces. Cornwallis has been ordered. You stay in that position. You wait for that naval force to arrive a second time. He will be completely surrounded, but the Allies control the waterways, and if you have control of the waterways, you have the largest weapon possible. 9 days, over 15,000 exploding shells and shot will come over this wall. This wall is amazing because it's one of the features that gives definition, scope, importance to here to being with what would become the last major battle of the American Revolution. Let's take a walk over here and take a closer look at this. Over there, a lot of people think that all battles take place at that time in an open field. That's not true. This British force is stationary. They're not moving. They will be completely surrounded. Their commander will make bad decisions. In this book, The Guns of Independence by Jerome Green, it's stated Cornwallis will abandon 8 outposts without a fight. Is that good or is that bad? It is bad. He will give up. And he is even criticized by his junior officers. Why are you giving up 8 outposts when Washington's troops arrived? At that time, Cornwallis states he needs to consolidate, pull his men in behind this line here. He will keep the word for military outpost, that's hollow in the center, made of dirt, is the word readout, R-E-D-O-U-T. He will hold on to number 1 on the far side of the village with the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, who would be from Wales. And he will hold on to number 9 that had 120 men out here on the field, and number 10 out in the distance. That's the focus of the infantry attack. After firing on October the 14th, Washington decides he needs to have a surprise attack. That's with 2 groups, elite groups of soldiers attacking at night under the cover of darkness, going into overwhelming those 2 outposts and converting the large one into what becomes American Grand Battery with 24 guns, firing easily, heavily into position. What I'd like to do is to get ahead of that rain that's coming our way. What I would like to do is to move to the other side of the building and have you look out on the field before that rain arrives over there. Let's move in this direction. It's through the village, it goes on the other side, anywhere from 1.25 miles, but I believe it probably would be 1.5 miles if you go at every turn, every bend. Here's a trench right over here. This opening, this pass was created well after the American Revolution. The community wanted to use this field out here for agriculture. In the early 1600s, the village of Yorktown becomes important because of the export of tobacco. Tobacco's good as long as it can sustain itself. However, the crop of tobacco, by its very nature, does something to the soil. It sucks out, leaches the nutrients. By 1781, this is not a productive area for agriculture. However, Cornwallis gets a report, open land, high elevated area. The village, the inhabitants, civilians, when they get a report that 8,300 troops are coming to their village, by and large, most of those civilians flee the area. And the family, we believe, for the Moore house 2 miles away, they will leave also. That's where the surrender negotiations would take place when the British forces surrender. When Washington's troops arrive, they will create, number one, a siege line. That direction over there, 800 yards away. They're firing their artillery. Number one, they're focusing on taking out Cornwallis's command center, a building very close to where you folks came in. It is hit heavily by artillery fire. Cornwallis will need to go underground in a burrow, in a dugout that he would call a grotto, and it's actually on the other side of where I see a rail fence over there on the other side of the parking lot. That is his headquarters. This tells us how intense, how heavy, how traumatic it was with all this heavy artillery fire. It's 24 hours a day, 9 days. There is no way to get out of this. They got 700 horses. Those horses are dead. They emanate a foul smell. You're running low on all resources. You're running low on drinking water. There's no ability to escape, and you're losing your artillery along this line. Gun after gun is being lost and lost. And then the Allies will encroach and get closer. 400 yards away, they will create this wall over here. It would have its trench, bring in artillery. The Allied officers know the focus would be that forward outpost right over there. That's number 9. If they could take that in a surprise attack on that high elevated area, they could convert that into an Allied gun position. They could actually bring in 24 guns and fire point blank, accurately, heavily down deep into the village. And this is the decision, is that this is where the attack will take place, not in the daytime, but at night. 2 groups of soldiers, elite groups, will come in. On October the 14th, the focus would be fire along the line, fire more on the other side of the village. If you are one of the British officers and you get a report you're being hit more at one area, it looks like they're trying to open up the line. It looks like as a result they're going to attack with infantry in that area. They will fire a little bit over here, but not heavily and not concentrated. That is the diversion that will take place. Alexander Hamilton, in his 20s, Lieutenant Colonel, leading troops from Connecticut, New Hampshire, and New York. He will meet with his men before they attack, running across the field. He orders his men that when they attack with muskets, they need to have unloaded muskets. If you fire a musket at night, it will give off a flash. It can be seen hundreds of yards away. The British officers could send men in, counterattack, halt the attack. They need to have it in complete darkness. They will attack with bayonets. Their directive, what they need, is to go far back into the trees today to a small outpost that's a command center with a British officer known as Major Campbell. If they threaten that British officer, he will order his men to surrender. That takes place in only 10 minutes. They're able to pull it off. First American going in, he's Sergeant Brown from Connecticut. His hand is impaled on a British steel bayonet. Washington later gets a report about this man, his valor, his courage. Has been wounded. He will be awarded what we call today the Purple Heart. He will be the second recipient of that award, and it will be awarded in person by General Washington after